Hey, and welcome back to the Humble and Brag podcast. We're trying out a new format with this episode. We're just going to have one main talking point and some questions around that. How are you, Ed?
I'm doing well. Got a few questions prepared for you.
Oh, slightly nervous.
I think we're going to try and talk a little bit slower. We have to remember to talk a little bit slower.
This is it. I've already feel like I've done the intro quite fast now.
With more gravitas.
More gravitas, more pause, more finesse. But this is the new, improved, slower talking Humble and Brag podcast. Welcome back. How are you? Let us know in the comments. You mentioned you had a couple of talking points for this episode. What would you like to cover?
First of all, let's start off with an easy one. So you've worked in YouTube for how long now? As in worked with YouTube as a channel for the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, I would say the last 5 years.
Okay, and worked at two companies?
Yes.
So looking back, if you were starting out, what 3 things would you do differently in order to achieve the kind of success that you've had, perhaps more quickly, or otherwise achieve, even if it's possible, even bigger success?
Even if it's possible. That's a good question. I think if I was to start from scratch and do things slightly differently, I would probably encourage myself and or the team that I'm working in to spend a week or two just deep diving into a whole bunch of YouTube creators that talk about how to be successful on the platform. I feel like in the past I did this kind of piecemeal. Like if I had a specific problem that came up after a few months of publishing, I would go and research it and try and figure out how to refine that. But I would literally just spend, and this is maybe something that we can provide for people, a pool of nice resources that people can go in and learn about the platform and how to succeed in it. So I'd probably spend a couple of weeks doing that with the team and making sure everyone's on the same page. And yeah, kind of up to scratch with what needs to be done and how to do it. A second thing I would do, I would really, and this is maybe where I didn't do this in the last 4 or 5 years, but I would definitely spend a lot more time thinking about the composition and the concepts behind video thumbnails. I mean, we'll talk about this later, but thumbnails are a huge part of YouTube and YouTube success on the platform. And I think I would spend a bit more time carefully mapping out what we need to do, what would be kind of an enticing, curiosity-arousing thumbnail. And I think a lot of the time, just given time frames and turnaround times, thumbnails are kind of done as a last-ditch thing after the shoot. You take some nice snaps with some, silly poses like this, but definitely really doubling down into what the competition are doing and refining the thumbnails to really pop out against that. I think I've definitely had some success with thumbnails, but definitely building that workflow into the team structure. And then third, and this is maybe where I started off quite strong, but I think it's definitely lapsed because it does take a lot of time, is community management. Either advocating maybe for a dedicated community manager or perhaps a social media manager to come in and help. But I definitely feel engagement on videos is a big lever for success. And you find that if you go back and answer a bunch of comments on a video that's been live for maybe 2 or 3 years, you get a flurry, a little increase in viewership. So I think having a bit more of a regulated workflow with community management and maybe having someone in-house to do that and advocating for that would be key. So these are all maybe quite tactical things. I don't know if you wanted more overarching like strategic things, but I think these are kind of tactical things that I would do as a sort of YouTube producer, YouTube manager day to day to ensure that the business had a successful channel or maybe a successful channel a little bit quicker. Okay,
so to summarize?
I've forgotten my points now. To summarize, I think I would definitely almost have like a little learning sprint with the team. I presume if there is a team in place, if not, whoever's advocating for the channel, I would definitely spend some time just doing some deep R&D research and development on the platform. Secondly, I would really develop quite a robust thumbnail ideation process and bringing that into the kind of content production more as a kickoff rather than a kind of afterthought. And then thirdly, I think just really robust community management. Again, it takes time, and the benefit of YouTube is, yes, it's evergreen, and these video pieces produce views and engagement for years to come. But then you also have to figure that you get kind of an exponentially increasing amount of comments coming in and from your viewership. So that would be the third point.
I think to come back to the idea of developing the YouTube thumbnails, for me, that has a lot of connections to basically any other marketing channel where you can kind of start with the hook or start with the angle of the video, and you want to get something that obviously inspires some degree of curiosity.
I was just checking the camera was recording.
Talking of curiosity.
It's recording, that's fine.
Yeah, and the same with the thumbnail. Like, you want to know the title of the YouTube video, ideally exactly what it's going to be, and have a good idea that it's going to be clicked upon and going to stand out against kind of the millions of other YouTube videos out there.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think that's the same. And then with the community management, it's the same thing. And I think you often hear creators talk about that as well, that often the kind of social component is forgotten in social media, that you're actually there to talk to your audience. And like, I think creators, obviously, that's really essential to what they do, but companies often completely neglect it. So you get a lot of comments, a lot of interest, and then there's kind of this barren wasteland from the company side.
Well, definitely for a business, I think community management, essentially like on any other platform, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, you are reflecting the company. So like I can understand there's a bit of trepidation around tone of voice and like the brand image as well, and like style guidelines in terms of how you respond and what kind of style you go with in terms of your response. And I think hopefully the benefit of us having our own channel is that we can just respond as ourselves, in kind, you know, keep it kind of conversational and fun. And I think when you're representing a company, it's maybe a bit more daunting for an individual, perhaps a YouTube manager or a social media manager, to do that consistently. So maybe actually affording them a bit more freedom in terms of tone of voice and
but also training. Like most companies simply leave that person. They don't give it much importance, first of all, and because they don't give it much importance, they don't train the individual, and then the individual is left there to try and decide these things about, and also to just doubt themselves as to whether they can hit this kind of tone of voice, etc. Because you have to have some degree or sense of ownership to be able to answer with any confidence, I think.
Well, this is true, especially if it's a technical topic as well. If you're doing a technical, I don't know, talking about your product or your service and it's quite technical, I don't think it's necessarily fair to expect anyone that's doing community management or social media management to be able to answer with that much authority unless they know the product inside out. So you also have to kind of factor in training on the product side or the service side of whatever your business is offering. So that's definitely something to consider as well. But I just think every comment is a potential lead, you know, and definitely some comments can be quite frivolous. It's like, hey, I enjoyed the video. But some are like, hey, I really like this idea or concept. Like, where can I figure out how to do this service or find this product? And if you happen to be selling that service or product, then you want to get on that quite quickly. I
mean, we actually measured this back when we were working at Babbel. We had a big customer service department, and they were responsible for answering all the social media comments, including on YouTube. And every comment that had some kind of relation to the product, they would link into the demo with a little short link that they could track. That it had specific to customer service, essentially. And then on a weekly, monthly basis, you could easily see how many leads were coming from comments. And the number was relatively small, but the quality was extremely high. So you'd see like in the hundreds of leads coming through. And then you would see a really high conversion rate to the actual purchase of the product compared to the average lead coming through YouTube or any other social channel. So like the quality is definitely high, and then also just the kind of, I don't know what you'd basically call brand affinity that comes through it. You answer a comment in a comprehensive way that adds some value or like answers a question, and then you get these like effusive comments in response with heart emojis and stuff. Like, oh, I never expected you to answer because you're thought you were a faceless company. Turns out you have a bit of a face. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about YouTube, definitely.
Yeah, and it's evergreen as well. You can get comments on videos that you've released maybe like 3-4 years ago. Gets a little bit overwhelming when you're trying to manage that, but it's actually really, it's a really cool platform for that. But let me turn that question back around. I'm very curious because you've had a different, I guess a different line of work and a different set of workflows with YouTube. Could you maybe look back at your career and maybe tell people how long you've been working in YouTube for, but also what you would do differently? Maybe 3 things if you could go back.
I mean, I think the first YouTube video that I produced for a company was 2008, so that 15 years.
Damn.
Shows how old I am.
That's why we have 2008 on the website. So it's
exactly.
Ed was an early adopter.
And I think, so when I first started with YouTube, then this is basically the first job that I had in marketing. So I was kind of approaching it very naively. And I think that continued for the first company and a half, so to speak. So when I started at Babbel, we managed to justify YouTube as a channel quite kind of cleverly through producing performance-oriented videos and showing how many leads, how many sales we could generate, tracking everything quite accurately. And then as soon as we got the justification for attributing more budget to it, we hired, and then we kind of had this thought that we could just do everything. So let's commission videos from all these different freelancers on the topic of language learning, and just kind of go big. And it very, very quickly got very overwhelming. So from a purely kind of procedural perspective, it's extremely difficult to scale that quickly. And then also purely for the subscribers, the viewers, it's obviously very confusing what they're actually subscribing to, because you have all these different kinds of videos. So you could have an individual video that was successful by itself, but you didn't really have many kind of returning views as a consequence. And that was kind of one of the big things that I learned back then, is the absolute importance of predictability in your strategy. So basically, as you would say with brand, that it's very important to kind of be consistent and to repeat yourself over and over again to drive home the message of your company. Then the same with the YouTube channel, you need like a predictable strategy so that people know that you're going to release videos on one certain topic of one certain kind, ideally with a few recognizable faces, so that people can really build up a kind of relationship and an expectation of what you're doing. Yeah, and it took a while for me to realize that that was the way, and that less could be more. And yes, you need to produce a good volume of content.
I'm just checking the camera. I can't see the little record sign, so I didn't mean to cut you off. Left? It's good. It's still recording. You can tell we're getting used to this, folks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need that predictability for the viewership and to build up the subscribers.
Can I just come in there quickly? Yeah. What tactically would you say you could do to increase predictability? Is it like release schedule? Is it the kind of consistent talent that you use? What would you...
Yeah, I think if those would be the first three things that come to mind, like ideally a presenter that is recognizable, that is in a video every week or every couple of weeks, so that people can build that connection to them. And then I think to have similar themes and similar style of the video. So you talk about whatever topic is relevant to your company, and you're producing those kind of 10, 15-minute videos maybe that are kind of informational, or they're funny, or they're whatever it might be, but that people know what to expect. And I think in terms of, the cadence of the release, ideally on a weekly basis, and again, so that people know that your video is going to be there, and every Thursday they could watch the video, for example. Especially important, I think, if you're in like some... I think particularly in B2B or something like that, where people are using your channel in order to stay on top of all the latest things that are happening in that particular field, then you can benefit enormously from having those three areas of consistency.
Yeah, massively. So that was the first one.
That was the first one. I talked for quite a long time.
No, it was good. But like, what would you say would maybe be two other areas that you'd refine?
So one big transition, one big improvement I noticed when we were working together at Career Foundry was the moment that we went from producing everything in-house to outsourcing the editing. So when we went from shooting everything in-house and doing the edits to shooting in-house, but then outsourcing editing, because that was the moment that we then created a backlog of videos and were guaranteed to have this weekly release. And then it gave us the platform to then be able to explore other formats and more frequent releases than every week, and then be a bit bolder with different kind of lines of content. So looking into testimonial content and stuff like that, there was a bit more brand building. So that was a huge shift procedurally that had a massive benefit, I think. And you also like almost saw this kind of inflection point from the moment that we switched to that the subscriber growth really started accelerating.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, that's a really interesting one, and I thank you for that. Cool. And then maybe lastly, did you have a final point? Or?
My final point is similar to what you said. So to be social, it's pretty much identical to what you said, to remember that it's a social channel, and that means, on the one hand, community management, using the community tab, all those kinds of things, using the community tab to then not only necessarily promote what's happening on YouTube, but across the company.
Yeah.
And then also I think one thing that we didn't really do so much at Career Foundry, but it's to kind of really try and get themes and ideas for future videos from the audience, so that they become increasingly more involved and invested in the channel itself. And I think that's something we can do with Humble&Brag, for example, because we know that we can just kind of stand here and talk about topics, or we can produce course materials, or whatever it might be. We can really get ideas from the people, and then talk through our experience or research or whatever it might be, in order to answer those questions and provide as much value as possible.
Yeah, I really like that. And
Let's be social.
Yeah.
Let's correct all these things. And
less humble, more brag, in a way. Or maybe more humble, less brag.
Just a lot of both, I think.
Yeah, that's what the people want, hopefully. If you're watching this, then maybe that's what you want. If you're still watching this, that's definitely what you want. So thank you for sticking around. Was there any other points you had there that you wanted to?
Those are the big three for me. So being more strategic, making sure that we outsource editing as soon as possible. From Humble&Brag, as soon as we have the budget.
Yes.
To do that, and
as soon as
until then, we're going to be editing, and then to treat it like the social platform that it was designed to be.
Yeah, no, those are really good points, and definitely I think something that we would hope to do on our own channel as well, and definitely the social element I think is really important. So once we unlock the community tab, I'm not exactly sure the specifications of how we do that. I think you have to be a member of the partner program, but it's a really nifty tool. So if you're watching this in a year's time, hopefully we've got a very well populated community tab.
Maybe you saw this video promoted from the community tab.
Exactly.
As we surface old content and say, look how right we were.
What would we now need like a really clickbaity kind of name for this podcast episode, I think.
The three things that you're doing, if I can speak properly, that's also important.
This is us trying to speak slower as well. I find it personally
and I'm still dribbling,
hard.
I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like I'm having no, I won't say. Three things.
The three things you're doing wrong in your YouTube strategy or something along those lines. I find that those like 3+ negative always worked well for blog titles and YouTube videos.
I like it. Hopefully if you've clicked on this,
it worked.
It worked. But yeah, that's like a little short bit on the three things that we would do differently. Again, that's not the title. That's not informing the title. But if we would start over, and I think, as you said, you started in 2008. I'm slightly less prestigious with my YouTube career, starting in 2018, nearly 10 years later.
I think it's a rabbit and a tortoise
exactly.
kind of thing going on.
I wasn't going to make that analogy or that comparison, but thank you so much for watching. We hope you've enjoyed this kind of new format. We're just trying out some different talking points. And yeah, if you liked it, it would really help us out if you could like the video and also subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you in the next episode, which we're going to film immediately after this one.
Yeah.
But you'll see maybe with a week or two's difference. Or maybe, I don't know. I'm going to stop talking in terms of like people watching in the short term and also 5 years down the line, because I feel like it's just...
They're just going to see how we've aged, how our faces
Exactly.
dropped.
I mean, I've had a haircut.
I mean, if the company's going well, we'll both have spectacular facelifts.
Massive gold chains and just like a row, things. I've had a haircut since we last recorded.
People will notice.
I noticed you didn't comment on the... It's fine.
It's going to do it off camera.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode.